مستقبل كتير يمكن نعيش يمكن نموت. This is my room.
Oh, your own bedroom now. Wow,
Yeah.
butterflies.
I was like excited because I will go to a new country and then I will see my new life in there.
Oh, what does that say?
The happy girl.
That was a clip from a report by Lyse Doucet of BBC News. She was reunited with a Syrian family she met in Damascus 2 years ago. Since then, as you saw, that family now calls Canada home, which, by the way, is where Lyse Doucet is from, New Brunswick, in fact. Lyse is the BBC's chief international correspondent and joins me now from New York. So, Lyse, we saw the tape there, and you described the reunion as a sweet surprise. How so?
Well, everyone loves a bit of serendipity in their life, and the sweetest serendipity is something which, of course, is positive, where you really feel that happiness is overflowing. And there I was in a park in Toronto. We had come to Canada to do a report on Canada's model of private sponsorship, citizen sponsoring, clubbing together to support groups of support Syrian families who were coming to Canada. And there we were in this melee with Canadian families and Syrian families. And just that morning, I'd sent a message to Beirut saying, do you know where the Saba family is? I'm in Canada. I'd really like to try to find them. But we had no contacts. And then all of a sudden, a little boy comes up to me, as they often do when he goes, what is your name? And I thought he was playing a game with me. So I said, what is your name? He goes, no, what is your name? And I said, it's Lyse. And then I could hear these kids behind me screaming, Lyse! And then I looked, and of course I didn't expect to see them there. And there they were, the 4 children of the Saba family, their mother. Totally described. If you met them, going down Yonge Street, Bloor Street, you'd think, oh, here's, a Canadian family. Dodd was transformed from 11-year-old girl you just saw in that clip, who lived with nightmares in Damascus. Her family was destitute. They were fearful. Dodd said she hated the future because she wasn't sure day in, day out whether she'd live or die. And here she is in Canada, playing basketball, playing baseball, swimming, and waking up every morning with this sort of that joyful teenage sense of, wow, my life is ahead of me. It's extraordinary transformation. And I have to say, Andrew, Syria doesn't have much happiness or happy endings, but you see these stories and happy endings are possible. They'll be like all Canadians now if they stay here, and I think they will. But the usual troubles of life, but not the troubles they saw in Damascus.
Now, you first met the family, as you mentioned, 2 years ago in Syria while covering the civil war there. You talked about Dodd's nightmares, but can you paint us a picture of what life was like there before coming to Canada?
Their family home on the outskirts of Damascus, we would call that in Canada middle-class home, had been destroyed in the fighting. They fled in the dark of night and were, through the kindness of a shopkeeper, they were living above a shop in the old city of Damascus. They were about to be evicted the last time I saw them in the spring of 2014. And the mother, Hanan, had said to me, we're thinking of leaving. And I said, oh, that's dangerous, and it's not going to be better for you in Lebanon. And that was the point where the refugees in Lebanon were having a hard time. So then I knew they'd been to Lebanon. I lost contact with them there. I knew they'd come to Canada. I didn't know where to find them, and I did find them. And more than 2 years later, here they were in Canada.
And as we're speaking with you, Lyse, we're showing some moments from that report that you made. And that you're hugging the children are hugging you. You've covered so much in the world. You've witnessed so much. What was it about this particular family that obviously touched you and touched them?
I think it was not, everyone watching this program knows what it's like when you find people that were in your life and they suddenly reappear again. So that's that happiness of finding each other. But in this particular case, I think for both that family and for me, it was relief. I was relieved because here they were safe and sound in Canada and for all impressions happy. They then saw someone who they knew in Damascus, and it was almost a confirmation that chapter of their life had ended. So it was relief and happiness all mixed in one. It's a sort of wonderful sort of reunion just by chance.
And now Canada is exporting its model of private refugee sponsorships to other countries. We're expecting to hear from Prime Minister Trudeau any moment now to talk more about this. Do you think Canada will be able to make a difference in the refugee crisis with a message from a Prime Minister who's fairly well known around the world and fairly popular?
Well, as you know better than I do, whether liberal or conservative, Canada has a history of welcoming refugees, of welcoming immigrants. You know, 4 decades ago it was the Vietnamese refugees, which is where the private sponsorship started. Canada in 2016 is a very different country than, say, Europe. It's an ocean away from the crisis in the Mediterranean. Every family who comes is carefully vetted. And of course, Canada is a vast country. But even allowing for all that, and thankfully Canada has been spared some of the attacks we've seen in Europe and indeed here in New York. Even putting that aside, is there a model of allowing individuals to club together to support refugees financially and also to help to integrate them into society? From what we saw in Canada, and you have already seen it, you've reported on it on the CBC, and the evidence is that people, newcomers, integrate better when they have someone to hold their hand in those difficult first months and difficult first year. But as you know, in Canada, the questions are being asked, how many can Canada take? And what are going to be the challenges long term? There will be challenges. Some will not integrate so easily as others. But this is something that Canada, for the moment, despite some critical questions in the air, it's not a monolithic society, as you know, that this is something that could possibly work, and it could work in other countries. There has to be a solution for the refugee crisis. There has to be new ways of dealing with the problem. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse.
And because it's 5 years later, with no end in sight, right, to the civil war in Syria. So, and the latest with the UN suspending all aid after a convoy was hit near Aleppo. What has it been like for you watching and following this conflict for all of these years? No end in sight. There's a glimmer of hope, and then it's just dashed in days.
I think, you know, as you know, Andrew, everyone always says journalists just like, you know, bad news stories. We look for the negative, but we're all human beings as well. And it is daunting to go year in, year out to cover stories where you meet people again and again and you try to find some hope in the darkness. And in Syria now, there are so few moments of hope. Even though it started out as a peaceful uprising, it just seems to get worse. Every time you think it can't possibly get any worse, it does get worse, and it has gotten worse in the past 48 hours, which again makes it so sweet when you see people who are fleeing for their lives finding a new home, at least for now, away from this violence and away from this real darkness in their life, and this sense of that they're not even not having hope, but not even having a future, that Syria has become a place to die and not to live.